Okay, so everyone get ready, because today we're going deep into the world of software testing tools.
Yeah, the things that make sure all the software we use actually works.
Exactly. It's about way more than just finding bugs. Really, it's about ensuring that the software does what it should, whether that's an app on your phone or a website you visit.
And honestly, this whole area of testing is always changing. It seems like there are new tools all the time, right?
Yeah, you're right. New tools pop up all the time, driven by a lot of things, actually, like AI, the huge number of people using mobile devices, and software just keeps getting more and more complex.
It's true. So for anyone who uses software, and that's everyone really, uh, understanding this whole landscape of software testing, well, it's more important than ever.
I completely agree. It doesn't matter if you're a developer, or if you work with developers,
Hmm.
or even if you just want to understand more about the tech you use every day.
For sure.
This deep dive will give you a good grasp on the main categories of testing tools and some cool insights into specific tools. But most importantly, we're going to cover why this matters to you. Okay, perfect. Let's get started then. So first, what are software testing tools?
Basically, they're any products that help support the whole process of testing. Think of it like building a house. You don't just like start throwing bricks around.
Right, yeah, that sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Exactly. You need plans, right? And tools for measuring and cutting and leveling and so much more. And software is similar. Testing tools provide a framework for planning what to test. And then you need tools to create the tests and run them.
Yeah.
And of course, analyze the results, manage defects.
Yeah.
So yeah, all those tools make sure the entire process runs smoothly. And the result is, well, a really solid piece of software.
Okay, so just like you have different tools for different tasks when you're building a house, we have all sorts of different types of software testing tools, right? Each one with its own specific purpose.
Yeah, for sure. Our source material breaks it down into a few key areas, like test management tools for staying organized, manual testing tools, automated testing tools, load testing tools, defect tracking tools, of course, because there are always going to be bugs, mobile testing tools, which are super important these days, API testing tools, security testing tools, because, yeah, security is a huge concern, and even CSS validator tools to make sure websites actually look the way they're supposed to.
Wow, that's a lot. So we're definitely not going to be able to cover every single tool out there. So let's start by talking about some specific examples from each category. Let's start with test management tools, since those seem like the foundation. Our source was really impressed by TestRail and Zephyr Enterprise. So what makes those stand out?
Well, TestRails is really flexible and integrates well with a lot of other tools. It's like the project manager of the testing world. It helps organize everything, track progress, and it can even generate reports.
Oh, and I saw that it's really customizable. Why is that so important in the software development world? Things move so fast.
Yeah. It's because every team works a bit differently,
Right.
right? Some teams are very organized and structured, and others are more agile. So TestRail lets you customize the workflow and reporting, so everyone stays on the same page without being stuck in a rigid system.
That makes sense. So it's not just a one-size-fits-all solution. So what about Zephyr Enterprise then? How is that different?
Well, Zephyr Enterprise is a bit more holistic. It sees itself as a testing partner and not just a tool. They offer support throughout the whole testing lifecycle from the very beginning to the very end. And they really focus on integrating with Jira.
Oh, Jira, that's a really popular project management tool, right?
Yeah, and that's a big benefit for a lot of developers.
Okay, it sounds like Zephyr is going for a more comprehensive solution then. So if you're a large organization with complex testing needs, maybe Zephyr is the way to go. But for those of us who are just starting out, maybe manual testing is a better place to begin.
Manual testing is all about getting hands-on. It's a human tester interacting with the software, clicking buttons, filling out forms, basically trying to break things, but in a controlled environment, of course. Our source recommends Testpad for making this process simple and efficient.
I was looking at Testpad too. I like that it's checklist-based. It definitely seems less intimidating than some of the more complicated tools.
Exactly. It's meant to be very easy to use, even for people who aren't very technical. One cool feature is that you can invite guest testers who don't even need to create accounts.
Yeah, I saw that. That's so smart. It seems like they're all about collaboration. No complicated onboarding, just jump in and start testing. That's a great way to get people who aren't comfortable with technical tools involved.
Yeah, for sure. And this is crucial in agile development environments, where speed and flexibility are really important. But of course, manual testing has limitations. It can take a lot of time, and it's easy to make mistakes, especially when you're dealing with large software systems. And that's where automated testing comes in. Automated testing can run tests quickly and over again without humans needing to constantly monitor it.
Okay, so that sounds a lot more efficient, especially for those repetitive tasks. Our source mentions TestRigor as a tool that's really pushing the boundaries of automation. They're even using AI, which is amazing.
Yeah, TestRigor is a really interesting example of how AI is changing software testing. Their human emulator is particularly interesting, actually. You can create tests by describing what you want to happen in plain English. You don't even need to write any code. It's like you could say, okay, TestRigor, go to the login page, enter these credentials, and make sure I end up on my dashboard.
Wow, so you're saying even someone who doesn't know how to code could potentially use TestRigor to create tests?
That's the idea. It has the potential to make testing accessible to everyone. But, AI-powered testing is still a relatively new field. And it has its limitations, of course. For example, it might have trouble with nuanced or subjective aspects of testing, like figuring out if the user experience is actually good.
That makes sense. It's exciting to see what AI can do, but it's important to be aware of the limitations.
Yeah.
Okay, speaking of limitations, let's talk about load testing. Our source mentions a tool called WebLoad as a popular choice. What is load testing exactly, and why is it so important?
Load testing is like a stress test for your software. It simulates a lot of users using your software at the same time to see how well it performs under pressure. Think about like a popular website during a big sale or a streaming platform during a big game. You need to be sure your website or app can handle that huge traffic spike.
Okay, yeah, so it's not just about whether it works, but whether it works when tons of people are using it.
Exactly. And that's where WebLoad comes in. It can handle huge amounts of simulated traffic, both in the cloud and on physical servers. So you can find potential problems before they become real problems.
It sounds essential, especially for things like websites that need to be available to everyone. Okay, so we've built our software and tested it thoroughly. And, well, even with testing, we always find bugs.
Oh, you're always going to find bugs.
So that's where defects tracking tools come in. And our source recommends Jira software for this. But I have to admit, Jira looks kind of intimidating. It seems really powerful, but also very complex.
Jira can seem complicated at first, yeah, but it's really powerful, and not just for tracking bugs. A lot of developers use it for managing projects, assigning tasks, and collaborating.
Oh, so it's like the central hub for a lot of software projects.
Yeah, can be.
And they have a free plan for individuals, which is great if you want to try it out without paying. But, even outside of software development, the principles of defect tracking are really useful.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Think about manufacturing or healthcare or even just your own to-do list. It's all about being able to keep track of issues and prioritize them and resolve them. That's a skill you can use everywhere.
That's a good point. Okay, so let's shift to mobile apps now. It seems like everyone has a smartphone, so mobile testing is more important than ever before. Our source highlighted Appium for its wide platform support. So what is it about Appium that's so useful for developers?
Well, Appium lets you test on both iOS and Android, so developers don't have to rewrite their tests for each platform. It's all about efficiency and being able to reuse things, and that's super important in the world of mobile development.
Okay, I also saw that Appium has a low memory footprint. I'm not a developer, so can you explain why that matters?
So a low memory footprint basically means that it can run smoothly even on older devices, and that's a big plus for developers who maybe can't afford to test on a ton of different devices.
So it makes testing more accessible.
Perfect.
Okay.
Okay, we've talked about testing apps, but what about all the behind-the-scenes stuff that makes apps work? So that's where API testing comes in. APIs are basically the messengers of the software world. They allow different apps to talk to each other and exchange data.
Okay, can you give me an example?
Sure. Imagine booking a flight online. You put in your travel dates and choose your flights, and then you pay. Well, the airline's website uses an API to talk to the payment processing service. The API makes sure your payment info is transmitted securely.
So APIs are what keep things running smoothly behind the scenes.
And because APIs are so important, testing them is crucial. Our source mentions SoapUI as a leading tool for this.
Okay, and what makes SoapUI so special?
SoapUI is known for being really versatile. It's open source and supports both REST and SOAP APIs. And it also has some great security testing features.
I remember reading that SoapUI can even simulate attacks.
Yes, and that's super important in today's world. Data breaches and cyber attacks are more common than ever, so you need to take security seriously, and SoapUI gives you the tools to do just that.
Okay, so let's move on to another important area of testing, security testing. Our source highlights Invicti as a powerful tool here, so what makes it so effective?
Invicti specializes in automated security testing for web applications. It's like having a digital security guard patrolling your website, always looking for weaknesses that hackers could exploit.
So it's not just about checking for known vulnerabilities, it's about actually trying to break into your own system to see where the weaknesses are.
That's right. Invicti uses several techniques, like vulnerability scanning and penetration testing, to assess your website security.
That sounds reassuring, especially with all the data breaches we hear about. Okay, last category, code quality and maintainability. Our source recommends the W3C CSS validator for web developers. I've done a little bit of web design, and CSS can be so tricky. So why is a validator so important?
Well, CSS is what controls how websites look. It's super powerful, but even a tiny error can mess everything up, like a missing semicolon or an extra space.
Yeah, I've definitely run into that before.
So the W3C CSS validator is a free online tool that checks your CSS code. It makes sure your code follows the rules and will work across different browsers.
So it's like a spell checker for code.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered a lot in this first part. We've talked about all sorts of testing tools, from managing tests to simulating traffic to checking for security issues. But before we move on, I want to step back for a second. We've talked a lot about the tools, but what about the people behind them? What makes someone a good software tester?
Oh, that's a good question. You know, we can have all the best tools in the world, but they're only as good as the people using them. A really good software tester needs a few things. They need technical skills, but also analytical thinking. And they need to really understand how people use software.
It's not just about being like a coding genius. You need to be able to think like a user.
Right. You have to think about how someone might use the software and try to find those unexpected things that could cause problems.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Good testers are like detectives, always looking for clues that something might be wrong. They're not afraid to break things, but they do it systematically.
So there's a lot of creativity involved.
For sure. And they need to be good communicators, too. They have to be able to explain what they find to the developers and to the project managers and really anyone involved.
So it's about more than just finding bugs. It's about making sure the software works well for everyone. Now, our source material talks a lot about tools for developers, but what about the rest of us? Where do regular users fit into all of this?
That's a good point. You know, we all play a role in testing. Every time you use an app, you're testing it. Every time you visit a website, you're testing it. You're interacting with it, giving feedback, and finding potential issues.
So just reporting a bug or leaving a review can help?
Absolutely. User feedback is super valuable for developers. It helps them see how people are really using their software. And they can use that feedback to make it better.
That's cool. So even if we're not developers, we can still help make software better. Okay, let's go back to talking about specific tools. Last time we talked about security testing with Invicti. Now I want to dive into some more examples in the mobile testing space. Our source mentions Espresso and Perfecto in addition to Appium. So can you give us a quick overview of how they compare?
Sure. So Appium is great for its cross-platform support. Like you said, it can test on both iOS and Android. But Espresso is specifically for testing Android user interfaces. And it's known for being really fast and easy to use.
So if you're only working on Android apps, Espresso is a good choice. What about Perfecto then? Our source describes it as a sauce platform, which sounds a bit more complex.
Perfecto is definitely a more comprehensive platform. It's cloud-based, so you can access a ton of different devices and browsers, so you can test your software under all sorts of real-world conditions.
Okay, so it sounds like Perfecto is for larger teams, or for projects that have more complicated testing needs.
Yeah, that's right. It's especially good for testing web and mobile apps across different platforms.
Yeah.
And also for IoT software, which is becoming more and more common.
Oh, IoT testing. I haven't heard of that before.
IoT stands for Internet of Things. It's all those devices that are connected to the internet, like smart home appliances, wearables, and industrial sensors.
So it's not just software, it's also hardware.
Yeah, testing those devices is really challenging because you're dealing with the software, the hardware, the network, and all sorts of real-world situations.
That does sound challenging.
And that's why a tool like Perfecto is so useful. You can access real devices and simulate different environments.
It seems like the Internet of Things is only going to get bigger, so those tools are going to be even more important in the future. Okay, so we've covered Appium, Espresso, and Perfecto for mobile testing. Our source also talks about a tool called digital.ai for continuous testing. What does that even mean?
Continuous testing is a big part of modern software development, like with Agile and DevOps. It's about testing throughout the entire process, not just at the end.
So you're testing as you go.
Exactly. It helps you catch bugs early on and make sure everything is working as it should.
So it's a much more efficient way to develop software.
Exactly.
And digital.ai is just one tool that supports continuous testing, right?
Right. There are a lot of other options out there, both open source and commercial.
Hmm.
Some popular ones are Jenkins, Travis CI, and Circle CI.
So there are a lot of choices. Okay, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about how important communication is for software testers. It seems like that's often overlooked. So can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, communication is really key. Testers are kind of like a bridge between the developers and everyone else. They have to be able to speak both languages, the technical and the non-technical.
So they're not just writing lists of bugs, they're explaining what those bugs mean and how to fix them.
Exactly. And they have to be able to explain it in a way that everyone can understand.
So good communication skills are essential for a software tester.
Absolutely.
Okay, we've talked about the human side of testing and some more tools for mobile and continuous testing. Now let's move on to another really important area, API testing. Yeah, API testing. It feels super important these days with everything being connected. Our source mentioned a couple of tools, SoapUI and SOAP Sonar. What are the main differences? And when would you choose one over the other?
You're right. API testing is crucial with all these interconnected systems. We talked about SoapUI earlier. It's that versatile open source tool, great for teams who need flexibility and a lot of features.
And it works with both REST and SOAP APIs, right? So it covers a lot. What about SA Sonar then? What's its strength?
The SAP Sonar focuses on efficiency and being able to automate testing at a large scale. It's for teams who need to streamline their API testing process and get things done quickly.
So if you're a big company with tons of APIs and you need to test fast, maybe SOP Sonar is the way to go.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It has features built for high-volume testing and complicated integrations.
Okay, got it. The source also mentioned Tricentis for API testing, but with a specific focus. What's that all about?
Tricentis is interesting because they focus on SAP testing. SAP is this massive enterprise software platform. A lot of big companies use it, but it can be really complex to integrate with. Tricentis provides tools just for that.
So it's kind of a niche tool for a very specific type of API testing.
Interesting. Okay, before we wrap up, I want to talk about tools for code quality and maintainability. We already covered the W3C CSS validator for web developers. Are there similar tools for other programming languages?
Oh, absolutely. There are tons of tools out there to help developers write better, cleaner code. They're usually called linters or static analyzers. They don't actually run the code, they just analyze it for potential errors, bad style, and things like that.
So like a spell checker for code.
Exactly. Some popular ones are ESLint for JavaScript, PyLint for Python, and RuboCop for Ruby. These tools can really improve the quality of your code, which makes it easier to work with in the long run. Okay, so wrapping up our deep dive into software testing tools, I'm thinking about something we discussed earlier, the human element. We talked about communication, collaboration, user-centric thinking, all that. What about the future of testing? What skills will be important for testers as AI and automation get even more advanced?
That's a big question, and it's something a lot of people in the testing world are discussing. Automation is going to keep getting bigger, but I don't think it will ever completely replace humans.
So even with AI, we'll still need human judgment and creativity.
Definitely. The best testers will be those who can combine technical skills with an understanding of user behavior, business needs, and even ethical issues. They'll have to design tests that go beyond just checking if something works and really consider the user experience.
It sounds like the role of a software tester is going to keep evolving.
Exactly. Testers will need to be adaptable, constantly learning, and really good at communication so they can connect the technical world with the human experience.
This whole deep dive has been really eye-opening. I used to think software testing was just about finding bugs, but now I see it's so much more. It's about quality, advocating for users, and shaping the software that we all use.
It's been great exploring all of this with you.
And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of software testing tools. We hope you've learned something new and maybe even feel inspired to learn more. If you're interested, there are tons of resources online. Check out communities like the Ministry of Testing, play around with open source testing tools, and don't be afraid to ask questions.
Remember, the best software comes from collaboration and a willingness to learn. So keep experimenting and keep testing.
Until next time, happy testing.